Hey there and welcome. My name is Carlos Berdes, and in this video we are talking about NPCs, the non-player characters. So usually you have PCs that are the players and you have NPCs that are the non-player characters, and they are made by the GM, DM or etc. And usually you will have two approaches. One of them is just you are populating your world, so you have some kind of a world building. And another thing is usually that people are asking about how to create the memorable NPC. This is a buzzword for the moment. We are going to try to tackle that further on with the video. Another common thing is that most YouTubers or creators, they have a cake recipe about NPCs. And my content usually focus on being vague and evocative. So we are tackling that in a vague and evocative way. And so going with the common ways is one thing is major or minor NPCs, and I will approach that in further on with the video, so bear with me on that. And so we are going to the general ones. The most general one is how they react to adventurers. So adventurers in general, not just the player characters. Some of the NPCs will face the adventurers as saviors because they are much more powerful, they have a lot of gold, they have everything that they can ever imagine to solve problems. Some of them will see them as bad omens because usually when an adventurer approach your town, it's because there are some trouble, there are some big bad guy, or there are some really messed up stuff that is going on. And adventurers usually have much more coin than the common folk, so they will think that just dropping some coin is enough to mainly everything. And this leads us to the next one, that is the goal of the NPC. Sometimes the goal of the NPC is just surviving. Because, you have some adventurers, they are overpowerful compared with the normal person. So, for them, just surviving an encounter with an adventurer is enough. And sometimes they just want to continue farming and so on. But also sometimes you will have the NPC that has a very more complex goal that is tricking, convincing, or even commoting or proving that their way or their opinion is the right way, and they want the PCs to help them. Sometimes they are really tricking them, so it's not exactly the right way, but sometimes they are really trying to prove that nothing was done wrong and they need someone to help them. And now we are getting to the buzzword of memorable. And I'm not a fan of that because memorable is perhaps there is a formula, but I have not encountered one. Sometimes it's acting in a certain way, sometimes there are some mannerisms and stuff. I have a video on the difference between acting and role-playing and so on, but I do not think that there is a formula for getting memorable NPCs. I really prefer to focus on believable NPCs, and that that goes much more in the way of suspension of disbelief, and this is making sure that the NPC fits where you want it to fit on your world. And I have a video on suspension of disbelief, and I will approach that subject in a much more deeper way. But another one is like the major versus minor discussion. And usually when you go to the major versus minor one, major is one that is important or the main one for the plot. And both of them, I think that you need some kind of background, but in the major one, people tend to go to really long and detailed backgrounds. And you should not go for that. You do not need to go for that. You do not need to have a 5 pages background on someone just because they are a major one for the story. You need to have defined major points and the same things that I mentioned before, goals and so on, but you do not need to like mention who was their nanny on their 5th year or something like that. You have some major points and you construct by that. And when you improvise, being it with major or minor, make notes. This is a very important thing, is like make notes. Usually major characters are ones that are going to appear again and again in your sessions or your campaign. A minor one is usually someone that is just filling a role for the moment. But both of them, because sometimes you do not think that the minor one will be important, but sometimes they will be the memorable ones. So whenever you create, whenever you play an NPC, it's a major one that you planned or a minor one that you just created, make notes. If it's a major one that you planned but you had to add something, you write it down. And if it's a minor one, and you are playing like you get a name, they get a son, any children, you make that. And for the minor ones, usually you do not have everything planned out, and then you have to improvise, get some random things like name. Do not. Sometimes people get really got in that idea that you do not want your players to make fun of your names. They will make a way to make fun of your names. It doesn't matter. Any name, they will make fun of that name. I will put a link in the description with some tables to try to create names. Another thing is role. Which is the role that you have? As I mentioned, you have an in-game and a meta-game role for everything, every decision that you make. An in-game role is like, it's a butcher, it's a shopkeeper, etc. And the meta-game is like, they are the info dump. They are very important to the plot. They are there to confuse the players. Do not overuse that. Do not make your players overly not untrustworthy with every NPC, but you can play with that sometimes. But I will put a link that will help to make names, roles, and the last one that is quirks for every minor NPC that you do not have time to flesh out. But make sure to not use like quirks in a way that these abilities are not quirks. Okay? So do not use it like that. And when you are going to diverse NPCs, the diversity part is, I did not mention in one of the characteristics for the minor NPCs, because diversity is not a characteristic of someone. It does not define someone. So make sure that when you are creating NPCs, you make them diverse, but this is not a characteristic of them. This is not something that will define them. It's just that the world is diverse and you want that everyone feels welcome in your games as well. This is the video. It was a little bit longer than I imagined, but if you stayed as long as that, like the video, you know how internet works. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, and let me know some memorable NPCs that you have, or some NPCs that you plan to be memorable but weren't, because PCs, because people, it happens. And I will see you all on the next video. So, see ya! You shall not pass.